All right, I should be live. It's 7:04 p.m. on January 13, 2026, and I just made $62,330. Let me just refresh this so you guys can see. $62,330 dispatching trucks. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I did that step by step. So I'm going to show you everything. I'm going to break down like our overall strategy, how we found these loads, how we do our market analysis, how we negotiate rates, all that good stuff. I'm going to break everything down for you, just like the big overall picture view. Okay, I can't really go into a lot of detail in this video. It's only like 30, 45 minutes long. But if at any point you're confused on what I'm talking about, if you want to start your own truck dispatching business, don't pay me, don't pay anyone else for a course or anything like that. I have a full free course on YouTube that you can go through. I'll leave a link to it in the description. And at the end of this video, you can go watch it after you finish watching this video. Anyways, if you're interested in how I made this money, let's just go through it. So first and foremost, let me just break down the what we're seeing over here. So in the last 12 hours, since we started dispatching at 6 a.m., 7 a.m. today, Central Time, we have generated $62,330 in new loads booked. Out of those $62,000 booked for our carriers, we charge 10% on average. So our average profit that we're expecting to make for today is $6,233 as a company. And again, that's just in 24 hours. So that's really good. Okay, very happy with that. We can also see our month to date gross load revenue. So again, this number is just for today. This number is from January 1st to January 13th. How much money we have made for our carriers and how much money in gross profit we have made for our company. So just halfway through the month, and we have made $55,000 in gross profit. This isn't counting like employee salaries or office expenses or anything like that. Okay, just gross profit. This is our goal for the entire month. This is how much we would like to make in gross revenue by the end of the month. I think we're going to clear that. And then the other important thing I want to show you guys is the average RPM. So the average rate per mile that we booked for today is $2.70. This is really crucial. Okay. You might be thinking, oh, that's not good enough. It's not saying that we booked every load for $2.70. It's overall with all the backhaul included, with all the deadhead miles and all that included, we were averaging $2.70. So this is our all-in RPM, which is insanely good. And then total number of loads booked so far in the month. And this is our top dispatcher, how much money he's made us, blah, blah, blah. So that's the overall picture. We can see I've already blocked out like the important details. I probably should have blocked out our dispatchers' names as well. But you can see over here from 113 to 113. Let's see how many loads is that. I think, 28 loads. So out of 81 trucks, a lot of them are in transit. You can see over here. So they already have loads available for them, or they're already booked, or they're not going to be able to, they don't need another load for today or tomorrow. So we only needed to book loads for around 28 trucks. I think it was 31 that were active, but 3 of them didn't want to work or their truck was broken down or whatever. So 28 loads booked. You can see like the rates that we were getting and the rate per mile, the loaded miles, all that good stuff. Okay. So it's all in here. It always gets updated every single day. So I just wanted to quickly show you like what the numbers were actually saying, just so you guys can see like, hey, it's actually pulling all the right data. Anyways, so those are the numbers. Again, very, very solid day, but we had a specific strategy on how we were going to dispatch our trucks, which is what I want to share with you guys. So first and foremost, let me actually go into the market conditions. So every single day before we start booking loads, before we start looking at like this market conditions map, or we even start looking at specific lanes, the very first thing that I want to do is set like an overall strategy. So the strategy for today was our T+1 strategy that, we often do. So essentially, we're not booking loads for today. We're booking them for pickup for tomorrow to better schedule ourselves or to better position ourselves for the Thursday, Friday, and maybe even like the weekend freight. Basically, I want to be in a hot zone, in a hot market by the time it's Thursday or Friday so that we can pick up a really good load over the weekend. You can't really deliver a load on Saturday. You can, but not often on Saturday or Sunday. So we want to have really long runs and really high RPM runs over the weekend. That's like our main strategy. So we're doing a T+1 strategy Monday to Wednesday, Wednesday to Friday. So a lot of the pickups are going to be for Wednesday. That's essentially what that means. By the way, I also have notes on the side that I'm going to be referencing. So if you see me looking off to the side, that's what I'm doing. So that's like the overall picture. T+1 control day. That's where we're essentially like the strategy that we're trying to implement. Also, the second thing that we have to do before we start booking loads is understand like the macro context of the environment that we're living in. So nationally, what's going on? You have to be a little bit tapped into the news sources as well. So what's going on nationally? Like what are like the big pieces of news that I'm looking at specifically? So first and foremost, let's see over here, we have the January 30 shutdown. So a lot of these transportation organizations, transportation government organizations, they need to have some funding passed. And if it's not passed, then there could be another government shutdown coming January 30th. So I'm just keeping an eye out on that. Again, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. When there's uncertainty, that can really affect the amount of loads available and how brokers and shippers react. So they want to work more with reliable carriers, not just like brand new MCs when stuff like that starts happening. So I don't want to risk putting my carriers in, experimental markets. I want to run the same markets that I know are going to work really, really well. So I like to stick to like the freight spine of the US. So if you don't know what that is, it's kind of like the Midwest area right over here down to Texas as well. So like this spine shape, you could say, is like where I want to stick to. This is where there's a lot of reloads available. So if you drop off a load, let's say in Cincinnati, Ohio, it's a very good market. You're going to find a lot of options out of that market as well. And there's a bunch of other cities close by where you can deadhead to if you need to. Okay. Compare that to something like, let's say over here, I think there's a load that we just did from Dallas, Texas to Durango, Colorado. You can see where Durango is. Okay. There's not really, Durango's right over here. There's not really a lot of big cities near there. Okay. Denver is like, I don't even know, like, what is that? 250, 200, 250 miles away, maybe even 300 miles away. So it's super, super far away. Everything is really far away. Even Albuquerque is like 150 miles away from Durango. So you don't want to get stuck in a market like that unless you have a really solid plan. Again, I told you that we booked a load from Dallas, Texas to Durango. So I'll explain why we did that in just a few minutes. But anyways, stick to the freight spine. That's ideally our goal based on like what's happening nationally. The second thing that I was looking at is like the Jerome Powell stuff that's going on. So if you guys don't know, Jerome Powell is like the head of the Fed. So the Fed controls our monetary policy for the US, basically how if we're going to raise interest rates, if we're going to lower them, and those interest rates affect the rate at which banks can borrow from the government. And then those banks will then obviously loan that money out to customers, to businesses, and so on and so forth. So if the Fed is charging low interest rates, banks can get that money from the government at low interest rates, and they can also charge less interest rates when giving it to consumers. So low interest rates, economy starts to boom, but when the economy is way too hot, you need to cool it off. That's when you start implementing higher interest rates to start cooling off the economy so that there's no inflation, or like your inflation is under control. So essentially that's what Jerome Powell wants to do. He wants to increase the interest rate. He thinks the economy is doing well. The unemployment rate is good. So he wants to, or I'm saying he, but like the entire Fed wants to increase the interest rates, but the current administration, they don't want that, obviously. Trump doesn't want that because it's going to make him look bad. People don't really think too deeply about what's going on in the US. They just see interest rates going up and they automatically assume it's a bad thing. Okay. So Trump knows that. People are going to think that he's doing a poor job and he doesn't want Jerome Powell to increase the interest rates. He's threatening him with like a bunch of DOJ investigations and stuff like that. A lot of like, in my opinion, like dictator type of stuff going on. It's a little bit insane, but again, I'm not going to get political. The main thing that I gathered from that is that it's going to be a little bit harder to grow a trucking company. So if interest rates do go up, which I think it's going to be hitting trucking very, very hard. So not only on the demand side, so like that's like where shippers are putting out more loads is not only going to affect that because, again, they also need to borrow money at increased rates. So they're less likely to produce as many goods. So it's going to affect the amount of loads available and the amount of supply available as well. But it's not going to happen instantly. It's going to happen over time. But still, it's just something in the back of my mind. Again, leading me more towards stable zones, stable hot zones that I'm familiar with. Okay, I don't want to get too experimental when there's so much chaos going on nationally. And then finally, the Supreme Court tariff case. Again, I'm not going to dive too deep into this. Trump put out a lot of broad tariffs, and he used like an emergency power to do it. So he's basically saying like, oh, it's an emergency. Like the US is under like national threat and it's an emergency. So I have like the authority to just pass these executive orders, okay, without being challenged or without going through the proper, legislative steps that we go through. I'm not an expert at like the entire government's process, by the way, but the Supreme Court is still deciding if that was legal or not. And if it's not, all that money is going to have to be refunded back to the importers that paid that extra tax. So it's about like $150 billion. That's a lot of money. It's going to cause a lot of problems. Again, a lot of uncertainty that it creates in the market. So the main point that I'm trying to get across is that when national news and when like the national environment, the macro environment is very noisy, there's a lot of chaos going on, you want to stick to like your reliable lanes, your reliable routes that you're running, the reliable brokers that you have made connections with, you want to stick with them. And for me, or for our company, it's like this freight spine of America that we really, really like, okay? So we could get higher rates if we got a little bit more experimental, but I don't want my trucks to get stuck in a very bad market. Everything can change within a few days. So that's like the macro context. So I showed you guys, generally speaking, the strategy, T+1, and then the macro context, how it ties into our load booking strategy. And then right after that, the next thing that we can do is start looking at the DAT market conditions map, which is exactly what we're looking at. Okay. Now, a lot of people confuse this as like, this map is just going to magically tell you what the rates are, where the rates are good or not. That's not what it's telling you. It's just telling you, just use this as like kind of like a leverage map, okay? Or a load to truck ratio map. It just shows you where you have the most amount of leverage possible, where you have like the most opportunities available. It doesn't necessarily say that you're going to be making like $4 per mile in these markets, okay? So that's very, very important that you need to understand that. So this is kind of like something that we'll look at every single day, just get a general feel or just general idea of like where the markets are looking really hot. And as you can see, let me just change this to current. And let me zoom in really quickly. All these red zones are the zones that carriers have an advantage. Okay, it's like a carrier's market. They have more leverage. So in these zones, I could just click into one, let's say Indianapolis. There's a 4.9 load to truck ratio. So for every truck on the market that's posted here, there's 5 loads available, okay, which is really good. You have a lot of choices. Also, very tight market. You have a lot of leverage as a carrier. You can command higher rates. The reason for that is because in the Midwest, I'm getting a call. In the Midwest, there is like these regional runs that a lot of people like to do, okay? And because they're regional runs, they happen very often. There's a lot of load to be moved. And, so there's a lot of capacity opens up as well. So suddenly within a day, like Indianapolis will go from being like a very hot zone to it'll start to like die off and be a little bit of cooler zone because all the trucks suddenly got there. Okay. There's a bunch of quick reloads happening. Again, the time frame is only like the same day delivery or the next day delivery. So there's a lot of reloads happening. I don't know why I keep getting a call. Okay. Well, it's my dispatch manager. Probably has something important to say, but I'll talk to him after this call. But yeah, that's essentially what I wanted to show you. Try to aim towards the hot markets, the red zones. Obviously, stay away from like the cooler zones as a general rule of thumb. And then once you've selected like 3 to 5 zones that you particularly like or you want to investigate a little bit further, then you can go into, let's go back over here. You can go into your quick rate lookup tool and just look up the general rate that you should be expecting, like the average rate. And this is super accurate, by the way. It's pretty accurate, I would say. So let's say, for example, let me just use an example of, let's say Rockford, Chicago, or Rockford, Illinois, to, let's say Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's one that I want to look up. Rockford, Illinois, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, for a drive-in search. And it will tell you, on average, you should be expecting $3.70 per mile, but you could get a little bit better rates as well. Okay. So let's see, $3.70 for this, I would probably expect to get around like $2,300, $2,400 with the rates that we're currently seeing. Okay. So you could get a really, really good rate just by looking at this map, picking three to five lanes to investigate a little bit further, and then just using the quick rate lookup tool for your average. Is that simple. Okay. It doesn't have to be rocket science. So that's the general like analysis strategy, like the overall analysis strategy that we like to do. We start with the main strategy, look at what's happening in the US, like politically or in trucking or whatever, any major news that's going to impact us. And then we look at specific areas, specific zones. So that's step number 3. The next thing that we were looking at is, and this might be very different from what you guys are going to do. I'm assuming that a lot of you are working with less than 10 trucks. You're dispatching less than 10 trucks, I'm assuming. Maybe some of you haven't dispatched your first truck yet. You want to start a truck dispatching company. For you, this isn't going to really matter. You should always try to, if you have a small dispatching company, you should always try to run like just one main strategy across like all your trucks. So if you have 7 or 8 trucks, just run one simple strategy for all of them. Okay. However, since we're dispatching for 81 trucks, okay, we have like a portfolio of trucks that we need to manage. We have to layer them into 3 different buckets because the same strategy is not going to work for all of them. Okay. It's just, I'll explain how it's not going to work. So first and foremost, the 3 buckets that we chose for today. The first one was our production anchor bucket. So these are people that we want to have consistent miles for. So we want to run them on longer miles so we can generate higher revenue, but we're also trying to target higher RPM. Okay. The main strategy for these production anchor lanes that we're trying to run is to get them into a better hot zone or a hot market. So that, again, for our Thursday loads, for our Friday loads running over the weekend, we can get them really, really good loads. Okay. So for these production anchors, we're trying to run them into kind of like a longer distance so they can generate a lot of revenue, even if we have to sacrifice a little bit of RPM, but it gets them into a better hot market zone, gets them prepared for the end of the week to finish the week off strong. So that's one of our plays. Okay. And that applies to some of our trucks that we were dispatching for today. The second playbook that we ran is hot zone landings. Okay. So there's specific hot zones that we're very familiar with in the Midwest. So we were trying to drop off a lot of our trucks into these hot zones because I know they start to pick up heat around the end of the week. Okay. So around the end of the week, we could get a bunch of great rates going out of these Midwest cities like Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Columbus, even Detroit, St. Louis. These are all great cities to be in, even somewhere around Pennsylvania, North Carolina. This isn't even Midwest, but I think it's Midwest. Oh, I'm not going to count it. I'm counting it as a Southeast. But like Charlotte, these are all great areas to be around. So that was our second strategy. And the third strategy was our margin sniping. So early on in the week, Tuesday and Wednesday, I have one dispatcher that's just dedicated to trying to find these like crazy, insane lanes that are picking up the same day and they have like an insane margin on them. So they're running super long and they have a really high like rate per mile that they're willing to pay because the broker is really, really desperate. Okay. So again, I just have one dedicated dispatcher that's dedicated to just doing that every single week. And we were able to find just a few loads that match that. So if I actually try to spot them, I can't really tell based on, because I had to black out the origin city and the destination city, so we don't get backdoored on all of our lanes. But let me just see if I can find based on the RPM This one, I saw $4 per mile. This one right here. This was from Texas to Tennessee. Okay, so Fort Worth to Memphis, Tennessee. So this one we found a crazy lane. 500 miles, but we were able to pick it up for $4.60. Okay. You shouldn't be getting that type of rate. You shouldn't be getting that type of rate from Fort Worth to Tennessee. But we were, because the broker was desperate. He was in a very particular situation. He wanted to just get this load moved out, and he was willing to go negative just to move this load. But we had to also agree to do some other loads for him to make him profitable as well, which is totally fine. But there's a few lanes like that that we also ran. So those are the three main strategies to kind of make sure that we get a lot of money for our carriers and make them high RPM, rate per mile, so that they can cover their cost per mile, the expenses for their trucks, and they have enough profit for themselves after they end up paying us our 10%. So we have to take all of this into account. So that was kind of like the playbook, the truck level strategy that we have. There's also a few different rules that I kind of wanted to discuss with you guys as well. The first rule, obviously like the 2-leg rule, the backhaul head haul rule, whatever you want to call it. You don't want to just look at the lane that you're getting right now. You want to look at where that load is going to drop you off, the destination. Is it a hot market? Are there many options around it? Is it an easy reload? That's what we're trying to determine. Okay. So that was rule number 1 that I had for today for all of our dispatchers. The second big rule, again, this applies like every single day, but I just want to mention it as well, is deadhead. We want to maintain less than 50 mile deadhead. Anything over that requires manager approval. Okay. So again, deadhead can eat up a lot of your margin. You could get a really good load, or you think is a really good load. You think you're getting like $3.50 per mile or something like that. All of a sudden you have a 100-mile deadhead to it. It doesn't sound that great. Okay. If your carrier has a really high cost per mile as well, so that's why you need to know your carrier's cost per mile calculation as well. If your carrier has a really high cost per mile, they have a brand new truck that they're financing, they barely paid anything down, they have bad credit, all that stuff is impacting their insurance, their financing rates, all that. They have a crazy, insane cost per mile of $2 or something like that. Again, $2 to run 100 miles, that's $200 that basically you're never going to see ever. Okay. Your carrier just spent $200 to go pick up this load. So you're already down $200 off the rate, which again that's a lot of money. So yeah, deadhead, keep it under 50. The other big rule that I wanted to implement today across all my dispatchers is the liquidity ladder. So again, going from cool zones, these cool markets, into hot zones. We want to prep all of our carriers, get them in a position where they can capitalize by the end of the week. Get them into these hot zones that we are aware of by the end of the week, so that on Thursday, Friday, they can have a really strong pickup and have like a long route that they can run. So we have like 1,000-mile lane, hopefully at like $3.10, $3.50, somewhere around there per mile average. And they're going to make insane amount of money doing that. Okay. That lane alone is going to cover like a lot of the mistakes that maybe we made for them over the past week. So yeah, those are like the 3 big rules that we had set, and that's what we were focusing on. Now, let me just see if there's anything else that I wanted to cover, like any of like the main strategy that I wanted to cover. When it comes to negotiating, I just have like a little bullet point over here. When it comes to negotiating, obviously don't negotiate like the same load every single way. Every single load is going to be different. So you can use kind of like rules for yourself. So if the lane that you're negotiating in, if it's like a hot market where you have the advantage, then you can always ask for like, start with like $300 more over like their asking price, at least $300 more. You should understand the target rate per mile that you're already trying to hit because you've done the calculation for your carrier. You should already understand that. Aim for $300 more than what is expected, and then negotiate your way down. Okay, that's how you should do it. And you'll be surprised how much more extra money that you can get out of brokers. Never take brokers' word for what they're saying. Again, there's no way for you to verify if the broker is lying to you or not. So just always operate like they're lying. If a broker says, hey, I can't do more than $1,000 on this load. I got this load for $1,000. I'm giving it to you for $1,000. Sometimes that might be true. Okay. But there's no way for you to tell unless that broker shows you like his actual, like the rate confirmation from the shipper. So unless he shows you some documents, which they're never going to do, don't take their word for it. Always just look out for your numbers, what makes sense for you, and operate that way. Okay. And try to negotiate for $300, $200 more than the asking rate or the posted rate. If you're in a soft market, like if you're in a cooler market, like how we're going to be in Durango, we're going to try to see if there's loads over there. Probably not. So I could just show you why we did Durango. We had to get our carrier out of Dallas, Texas. And this carrier is actually, he has one of the lowest cost per miles that I have seen. So he's like one of our carriers that across our entire fleet, I think he might have one of the lowest cost per miles across the entire fleet. I think his cost per mile is like $1.15, $1.20 or something like that. Drives his truck super insane. Like his truck is metered, and I don't know how he does his like fuel efficiency or whatever. He works on his own trucks. He's an owner operator himself. He runs his own company as well. And his truck is fully paid for, fully maintained and everything by him. And his insurance is also really good. So his cost per mile, insanely low. So for him, we can afford to do a few deadheads and we won't lose a lot of money or a lot of margin. So out of Dallas, we brought him to Durango and we actually got an insane rate on this. So this is going for $3 per mile, but we actually got one for $4 per mile. Okay. So $4 per mile to go to Durango, Colorado, which is again, middle of nowhere. We might have to deadhead. The plan is we might have to deadhead out of there to, I believe, Albuquerque, New Mexico, which again is like 150 miles away. That's it's not gonna be fun to do. But out of Albuquerque, we have a bunch of options, a bunch of high-paying lanes that we can attack and again, build up that margin again. So for him, it worked out. It made sense for him to do it. I wouldn't really recommend doing this across your entire fleet. Okay, you're gonna get in a lot of trouble. This is where it gets a little bit more advanced. You have to start doing a little bit more planning. But anyways, again, if you're like in a soft market like that, you kind of have to be a little bit more, you have to be a little bit more aware of the appointment time so you don't get screwed on the detention or any layovers or anything like that. You have to be more aware of that. Any accessorial pay that you could get out of them, you know, any higher detention pay or something like that, better appointment times. Just ask for as much as you can. If you have to give in terms of lower rates, you should always ask for something in return as well to make it, make the load make sense for you. But that's just the nature of being in like a cold zone. It is what it is. You have to take the load, get out of there, do the best that you can, get into a hot zone, and then you will recover your money from the hot zones. But yeah, the negotiating part is not the important part. Most important part is positioning. That's where you guys should be focusing on. And yeah, I think that's really about it. Like those are like the big overall like strategy points that I wanted to talk about. So you guys can get like an idea of how like a bigger fleet would manage their dispatching. And you can also use these strategies when you're dispatching for your trucks as well. Even if you're only dispatching for 5 or 10 or 1, you can use all these strategies. Be a little bit more strategic in your planning. Don't just randomly come on the load board and go like, this is what I see a lot of you guys doing. Let me go back. Search loads. You'll do something like, let's say Chicago to anywhere in the world, 50-mile deadhead. I want to do it for a drive-in, full load, and yeah, just show me any load possible. And you'll go over here, you'll filter the rate by rate highest or even rate per mile highest. And you'll just be like, okay, yeah, Chicago to Portland, I'm going to make $5,000 on this. Oh, great. Okay, perfect. I'll just take this load. It makes no sense. Okay, you have no strategy there. Why are you going to Portland? Is it a good time to be going there at this time of the year? Are you going to be able to reload out of there quickly? Do you need a deadhead out of there? You need to understand all these metrics, even as a dispatcher. So yeah, that's really just like the analysis. Again, really solid day today. $62,000 made, $6,000 profit. Not too bad. I'm hoping by the end of the week, I'm going to record another one of these videos on Friday. I think we're going to end up making around like $75,000 gross on that day, which is going to be really insane. So that'll be really fun. But yeah, if any of this was confusing, if you want to learn how to start a truck dispatching business, if you want to make a lot of money just sitting at home, you know, working on your computer, if you're interested in that, then check out my free course. You can watch it on YouTube for free. You don't need to pay me or anything. I have a paid course, but you don't need to pay me. Watch the stuff for free, do it for free, learn, and start making some money. So yeah, I will see you in that training video.